You think soul food was just fried chicken and collard greens passed down in Sunday kitchens? Think again. Black grandmothers over 60 carry recipes so rooted in survival and celebration that most have quietly vanished from modern tables. Here are 30 soul food recipes only grandmothers over 60 still remember. Fried fatback was the foundation of flavor in African American kitchens, rendering golden lard while creating crispy slices that seasoned greens, beans, and everything in between. Grandmothers sliced thick pieces from salted pork back and fried them slowly in cast iron until the fat melted and edges turned golden brown. The rendered fat was saved in coffee cans, becoming the essential cooking medium for countless dishes. The crispy pieces were eaten as a side, crumbled over vegetables, or enjoyed with cornbread between meals. For families with limited money, fatback provided both seasoning and substance from one affordable cut. Children grew up with the sound of sizzling pork filling morning kitchens. This technique represented resourcefulness, turning one ingredient into both flavor and fuel. Ham hock and turnip greens carried tradition in every slow-simmered pot, filling homes with smoky aroma that signaled Sunday dinner was near. Grandmothers washed turnip greens several times to remove grit, then added them to pots with smoked ham hocks, onions, and a splash of vinegar. The greens simmered for hours until silky and tender, absorbing the rich, salty essence of the pork. The pot liquor left behind was liquid gold, sipped from cups or sopped with cornbread to capture every drop. Ham hocks were affordable cuts that butchers sold cheaply, perfect for stretching meals across large families. The meat fell off the bone by cooking's end, offering protein alongside vegetables in one nourishing pot. This dish taught children that patience and humble ingredients created meals worth waiting for. Crackling cornbread brought crunch and richness to the table by folding crispy pork cracklings directly into the batter before baking. Grandmothers rendered fatback until golden and crisp, then chopped those cracklings into small pieces that studded the cornmeal mixture. The batter was poured into a smoking hot cast iron skillet greased with lard, creating that signature crispy bottom crust. Each bite delivered earthy cornmeal sweetness, interrupted by salty, crunchy pork that melted slightly from the oven's heat. This bread stretched precious meat scraps into something that made plain beans feel like a feast. Children fought over corner pieces where cracklings concentrated and edges turned extra crispy. The bread kept well for days, improving as pork fat continued seasoning the crumb. Smothered neckbones transformed an overlooked cut into rich, gravy-laden comfort that warmed souls on cold evenings. Grandmothers seasoned pork or beef neckbones with salt, pepper, garlic powder, and paprika, then browned them until deeply caramelized. Sliced onions and bell peppers were added, cooking down until soft before liquid was poured in to create the smothering gravy. The covered pot simmered low for hours until meat became fall off the bone, tender, and gravy thickened to velvet. Served over rice or with cornbread for sopping, this dish turned a cut most ignored into something deeply satisfying. Neck bones cost almost nothing at the butcher, perfect for feeding large families on tight budgets. The marrow released during cooking added richness that expensive cuts could never match. Hoghead cheese was a traditional cold cut that grandmothers prepared after hog killings, turning scraps into a sliceable, savory loaf. The hog's head was cleaned thoroughly, then simmered for hours with onions, bay leaves, and vinegar until meat fell away from bone. Grandmothers picked through the cooked meat, adding sage, thyme, black pepper, and crushed red pepper for heat. The meat was packed into loaf pans and covered with reduced cooking liquid, which set into firm gelatin overnight. Sliced thin and served cold on crackers, Hoghead cheese offered tangy spice flavor that store versions could never capture. Making it required patience and skill passed down through generations of women who wasted nothing. This dish connected families to traditions stretching back through slavery and survival. Pickled watermelon rind turned summer's leftover scraps into a tangy, sweet preserve that lasted well into winter months. Grandmothers trimmed the green outer skin and pink flesh, leaving only white rind to be cut into uniform pieces. The rinds were soaked overnight in salted water to firm the texture before being drained thoroughly. A pickling syrup of vinegar, sugar, cinnamon sticks, and cloves was poured over prepared rinds in sterilized jars. After processing, jars were stored in cool cellars where flavors developed. Over several weeks, the result was a crunchy, sweet and sour condiment served alongside meats or eaten as a snack. This preserve represented the waste-nothing philosophy that sustained families through lean times when every scrap carried value and purpose. Molasses pulled candy was a family project that turned simple ingredients into chewy, golden ropes of sweetness shared across generations. Grandmothers boiled molasses with sugar and vinegar until it reached the hard crack stage, testing by dropping bits into cold water. The hot mixture was poured onto grease platters and allowed to cool just enough to handle. Then the pulling began, with buttered hands stretching and folding until candy transformed from dark brown to golden with light texture. Children took turns pulling, arms growing tired, but spirits high as candy changed color before their eyes. The finished ropes were twisted and cut into pieces that stayed chewy for days. Making pulled candy brought families together on winter evenings when entertainment meant creating something sweet from nothing. Pig's feet and rice delivered rich, gelatinous comfort that warmed bellies and stretched budgets further than almost any dish could. Grandmothers cleaned the feet thoroughly, scrubbing between each toe before placing them in large pots with water, onions, and bay leaves. The feet simmered for hours until meat became tender and cooking liquid turned thick with natural gelatin. Seasoned with salt, pepper, and hot sauce, the feet were served over fluffy white rice that soaked up rich, porky gravy. The collagen in pig's feet was believed to strengthen joints and nourish skin, making this both food and folk medicine. Children learned to navigate small bones and appreciate the sticky, satisfying texture that defined this traditional meal. This dish proved that cheapest cuts often delivered deepest, most satisfying flavors. Chow relish was a colorful vegetable preserve that grandmothers canned at summer's end when gardens overflowed with produce. Green tomatoes, cabbage, onions, and peppers were chopped fine and salted overnight to draw out moisture and develop flavor. The vegetables simmered in a tangy mixture of vinegar, sugar, mustard seed, and turmeric until they softened slightly but retained their crunch. Hot jars were filled and processed in boiling water baths to seal for winter storage. Served alongside beans or greens that needed brightening, chow added acid and crunch balancing rich foods perfectly. Making chow was a social event with women gathering to chop, stir, and share stories. This relish represented the art of preservation that kept families fed when fresh vegetables disappeared with frost. Pear preserves captured the honeyed sweetness of late summer in amber jars that brightened winter breakfasts for months. Grandmothers gathered ripe pears from backyard trees, peeling and slicing them into heavy pots with sugar and lemon juice. The mixture simmered slowly, stirred often, until pears turned translucent and syrup thickened to coat a spoon. Filled jars were sealed and stored in cellars where they lined shelves like golden treasures. Spread on hot biscuits or swirled into oatmeal, pear preserves delivered concentrated fruit flavor surpassing anything store-bought. Children watched grandmothers test the set by dropping spoonfuls onto cold plates, learning skills that preserved food and tradition. These preserves connected families to land and seasons, reminding them that abundance required preparation to last. Chitlin loaf transformed polarizing intestines into something even skeptics could appreciate, baked firm and sliceable like any meatloaf. Grandmothers cleaned chitlins meticulously, boiling them first with vinegar and spices until tender enough to grind fine. The chopped meat was mixed with breadcrumbs, eggs, onions, sage, and pepper before being packed into loaf pans and baked. The result was a savory spiced loaf that could be sliced cold for sandwiches or warmed with gravy for supper. This preparation made chitlins approachable for those who struggle with traditional texture while preserving distinctive flavor. Families served chitlin loaf at holiday gatherings, where aroma announced both tradition and celebration. The dish showed creativity of cooks who found multiple ways to honor every part of the animal. Pepper jelly was a fiery sweet preserve that grandmothers ladled over cream cheese or used to glaze meats with southern flair. Fresh hot peppers from gardens were chopped fine and simmered with sugar, vinegar, and pectin until the mixture reached jewel-like consistency. The jelly ranged from mild to blazing, depending on the cook's preference and peppers available that season. Poured into sterilized jars and processed for storage, pepper jelly kept for months in cool pantries. Served over cream cheese with crackers, it became the appetizer at every church, social, and gathering. Grandmothers brushed it over ham during baking, creating glaze that balanced sweet heat perfectly. This versatile preserve showed how garden peppers could elevate simple foods into something a guest remembered. Fried corn captured late summer sweetness in a buttery, caramelized skillet dish that tasted nothing like boiled corn on the cob. Grandmothers cut kernels from fresh ears, then scraped cobs with knife backs to release milky liquid that thickened the dish naturally. The corn was fried slowly in bacon drippings with sugar, salt, and pepper until edges began to caramelize and milk reduced to creamy sauce. Some added onions or bell peppers, while others kept it pure to showcase corn's natural sweetness. This dish appeared at Sunday dinners when gardens produced more corn than families could eat fresh. Children loved its sweetness, while adults appreciated how it transformed a common vegetable into something memorable. Fried corn taught that technique mattered as much as ingredients. Oxtail gravy turned the bony tail sections into the richest, most velvety sauce that ever graced a plate of rice or mashed potatoes. Grandmothers browned oxtails in heavy pots until deeply caramelized, then added onions, garlic, and tomato paste for depth. The meat braised for hours in stock until it surrendered to the bone and cooking liquid reduced to silky mahogany gravy. Collagen released from bones created body that flour-thickened gravies could never match. This dish stretched expensive, seeming richness from cuts that cost almost nothing because shoppers overlooked them. Served over starches that soaked up every drop, oxtail gravy made weeknight suppers feel like celebrations. The meat was eaten with fingers, every bit of flavor sucked from bones before they were discarded. Black-eyed pea patties transformed yesterday's pot of peas into crispy, protein-rich cakes that rivaled any meat dish for satisfaction. Grandmothers mashed cooked black-eyed peas with onions, egg, cornmeal, and seasonings before shaping the mixture into flat rounds. The patties were fried in hot oil until golden and crusty on both sides, while staying creamy inside. Served with hot sauce, chow, or alongside greens and cornbread, they made complete meals from humble leftovers. This dish proved legumes could anchor a plate just as well as pork or beef when prepared with care. Children often preferred these crispy cakes to the original pot of peas they came from. Black-eyed pea patties represented resourcefulness that turned one meal into two without sacrifice. Sorghum syrup biscuits were a breakfast tradition that predated maple syrup and corn syrup in southern pantries by generations. Grandmothers baked tall, flaky biscuits from flour, lard, and buttermilk, splitting them hot to receive thick drizzles of dark sorghum. The syrup's complex sweetness carried notes of molasses and caramel that refined sugars could never replicate. Children loved the sticky mess it made, licking fingers and chasing pools of syrup with biscuit pieces until plates were clean. Sorghum was often made locally from tall cane stalks, pressed at community mills each autumn. The syrup kept indefinitely without refrigeration, making it practical as well as delicious. This simple breakfast connected families to agricultural traditions that supermarkets have largely replaced. Stewed tomatoes and okra was a summer garden dish that simmered two southern favorites into silky, comforting spoonfuls. Grandmothers chopped ripe tomatoes and sliced fresh okra, cooking them slowly with onions, salt, and sometimes sugar to balance acidity. The okra released natural thickening properties, binding tomatoes into stew-like consistency without flour or cornstarch. Some versions included corn kernels, expanding the dish to use whatever the garden produced in abundance. Served over rice or with cornbread for sopping, this dish made vegetables the star rather than an afterthought. The flavors deepened when reheated the next day, making it practical for busy households. Stewed tomatoes and okra proved meatless meals could satisfy when made with fresh ingredients. Fried salt pork with cream gravy was morning sustenance that powered field workers through long hours before the noon meal. Grandmothers sliced salt-cured pork thin, soaked it briefly to temper the salt, then fried slices until crispy and golden. The rendered fat became the base for cream gravy made with flour and milk, seasoned heavily with black pepper. Crispy pork and rich gravy were served over split biscuits or alongside fried eggs for a complete breakfast. Salt pork was cheaper than bacon and kept longer without refrigeration, making it practical for families without modern conveniences. This dish provided fat and protein needed for physical labor in fields, factories, and homes. Simple ingredients prepared with skill could fuel hard work and long days. Persimmon pudding was an autumn dessert that captured the honey sweetness of fully ripe wild persimmons in dense, spiced cakes. Grandmothers gathered persimmons only after frost softened them, knowing unripe fruit would pucker mouths with unbearable astringency. The pulp was pressed through colanders, then mixed with flour, eggs, milk, sugar, and spices like cinnamon and nutmeg. The batter baked into pudding-like cakes that were dense, moist, and intensely flavored with concentrated fruit. Served warm with cream or cold the next morning, persimmon pudding was a seasonal treasure that appeared briefly each year. Children learned to recognize ripe persimmons by their soft appearance and sweet fragrance. This dessert connected families to wild foods and seasonal rhythms. Buttermilk chess pie was a tangy sweet custard pie that graced southern tables long before fancy French desserts arrived in America. Grandmothers whisked eggs, sugar, butter, buttermilk, and cornmeal before pouring the mixture into unbaked pie shells to bake. The filling set with a slightly caramelized top that crackled when forks broke through to creamy layers beneath. Buttermilk added tang that balanced sweetness, keeping the pie from becoming cloying. This was a dessert made from pantry staples that every household kept, requiring no special ingredients. Chess pie appeared at church suppers and gatherings where it held its own against fancier offerings. The recipe proved sophistication came from balance and technique, not expensive ingredients. Cornmeal dumplings were pillowy clouds of comfort dropped into pots of greens, beans, or stews to stretch meals and satisfy hunger. Grandmothers mixed cornmeal with flour, baking powder, salt, and enough buttermilk to form soft dough that held its shape. Spoonfuls were dropped into simmering potlikker where they puffed up and absorbed the flavorful broth while cooking through. The dumplings had a slightly gritty texture from the cornmeal that set them apart from flour-only versions. Served in bowls with greens and plenty of broth, they turned a pot of vegetables into a complete and filling meal. Children loved fishing for dumplings in their bowls, saving the softest ones for last. This simple addition proved that a handful of cornmeal could transform leftovers into something everyone looked forward to eating. Sawmill gravy was the working person's breakfast sauce, made from pan drippings, flour, and milk stretched to feed hungry families every morning. Grandmothers fried sausage or bacon first, then used the rendered fat as the base for a roux that thickened into creamy, peppery gravy. Milk was added slowly while stirring constantly to prevent lumps, and the gravy simmered until it coated spoons thickly. Crumbled sausage was often stirred back in, adding bits of meat throughout the sauce. Poured over split biscuits, sawmill gravy provided the calories and fat needed to fuel hard physical labor. The name came from logging camps where this gravy fed workers before long days in the forest. This dish proved that simple techniques and humble ingredients could create something families craved every morning. Fried rabbit was Sunday dinner in rural areas where wild rabbits were plentiful and store-bought meat was an unaffordable luxury. Grandmothers soaked rabbit pieces in salted water overnight to draw out any gamey flavor before dredging in seasoned flour. The pieces were fried slowly in cast iron with lard or bacon grease until the coating turned golden and crispy while meat stayed tender and moist. Rabbit meat was leaner than chicken with a slightly sweeter, more delicate flavor that paired well with cream gravy. Hunters provided rabbits and cooks transformed them into meals that rivaled any chicken dinner for satisfaction. Children learned to eat around small bones, appreciating the effort that went into providing protein for the table. Fried rabbit represented self-sufficiency and the connection between land and table. Blackberry acid was a tangy, sweet syrup that grandmothers mixed with water to create refreshing drinks long before commercial beverages arrived. Fresh blackberries were mashed with sugar and left to macerate until juices released, then strained and mixed with vinegar. The concentrate was stored in bottles and diluted with cold water whenever thirst struck on hot afternoons. The flavor was bright and fruity, with pleasant tang from the vinegar that made it more refreshing than plain sugar water. Families without ice relied on acid drinks because the vinegar seemed to cool more effectively than sweet beverages. Children ran home from play requesting glasses of blackberry acid, purple stains on their lips proof of enjoyment. This drink represented making refreshment from whatever hedgerows and gardens provided. Crackling bread was cornbread's richer cousin, studded with crispy bits of rendered pork skin that added texture and savory depth. Grandmothers saved cracklings from rendering lard, chopping them fine before folding into cornmeal batter. The bread baked in cast iron until edges crisped and cracklings became slightly chewy from absorbing moisture. Each slice delivered earthy cornmeal sweetness, punctuated by bursts of salty, porky crunch that made plain cornbread seem incomplete. This bread was served alongside beans, greens, or soups, where it could soak up flavorful broths. Families considered crackling bread a special treat because cracklings were only available after hog killings. The bread connected meals to the larger cycle of preserving and using every part of animals that sustained families. Streakoline with red-eye gravy was a breakfast that combined salt-cured pork with coffee-spiked pan sauce for bold morning flavor. Grandmothers sliced the lean-streaked salt pork thin and fried it slowly until crispy edges formed while the fat rendered. Black coffee was poured into the hot skillet, sizzling and deglazing the flavorful bits stuck to the iron. The liquid reduced slightly into thin, bitter gravy that cut through the pork's richness. Served over grits or with biscuits for sopping, this dish provided the jolt needed to face long days of work. The coffee and the gravy added complexity that plain pan drippings could never achieve. Red-eye gravy was working-class cuisine that proved simple ingredients combined thoughtfully could create memorable flavors. Jerusalem artichoke pickles preserved the nutty, crisp tubers that grew wild or in gardens into tangy condiments that lasted through winter. Grandmothers scrubbed the knobby roots clean and sliced them thin before packing into jars with onions and hot peppers. A brine of vinegar, sugar, mustard seed, and turmeric was poured hot over the vegetables, and jars were sealed for storage. The pickles stayed crunchy even after months in the cellar, their flavor developing complexity over time. Served alongside heavy dishes, they added brightness that balanced rich, fatty foods perfectly. Jerusalem artichokes grew easily with little attention, making them practical crops for busy families. These pickles showed how overlooked vegetables could become treasured pantry staples with proper preservation. Boiled peanuts were a southern specialty that transformed raw legumes into soft, salty snacks, anchoring family gatherings and roadside stands. Grandmothers simmered green peanuts in heavily salted water for hours until shells softened and nuts inside turned creamy. The peanuts were served warm in shells, requiring eaters to crack them open and slurp out the salty, briny insides. Some added cayenne or Cajun seasoning to boiling water, creating spicy versions that burned pleasantly. Boiled peanuts appeared at reunions, football games, and lazy summer afternoons on porches. Children learned the technique of opening shells without spilling brine, a skill passed between generations. This snack represented communal eating and patience required to transform simple ingredients into something special. Skillet corn pone was the original cornbread, made without eggs or milk and baked directly in cast iron over open fires or on wood stoves. Grandmothers mixed cornmeal with water, salt, and a bit of fat, then pressed the thick batter into hot, greased skillets. The bread baked until a dark crust formed on the bottom, while the top stayed pale and slightly crumbly. This wasn't fluffy modern cornbread, but dense, substantial bread that kept workers full through long days of labor. Corn pone could be made when eggs and milk were unavailable, making it practical during lean times. Broken into pieces and crumbled into buttermilk or potlikker, it stretched into simple but satisfying meals. This bread connected families to the oldest American food traditions and survival cooking. Cane syrup cake was a dense, moist celebration cake sweetened entirely with dark, complex syrup pressed from sugarcane stalks. Grandmothers creamed butter with cane syrup instead of white sugar, creating batter with deeper color and richer flavor. Spices like ginger, cinnamon, and nutmeg complemented the syrup's notes, while buttermilk kept the crumb tender. The cakes baked slowly until a toothpick emerged clean and the kitchen filled with spice, caramelized fragrance. Often served plain or with thin glaze, cane syrup cake was celebration food that appeared at holidays and special occasions. The syrup was often made locally at community meals, connecting the cake to agricultural traditions. This dessert proved refined sugar wasn't necessary for creating something families treasured and remembered.
Chicken liver pâté spread on crackers created rich, smooth bites that adventurous children tried, the creamy texture and distinctive flavor introducing them to foods that felt grown-up and sophisticated. Aunties would sauté chicken livers with onions and butter until cooked through but still slightly pink inside, then blend them with cream cheese, spices, and sometimes brandy or sherry until smooth. The pâté was chilled in molds or ramekins, then unmolded onto serving platters surrounded by crackers and garnished with chopped parsley or capers. The texture was silky smooth, while the flavor was rich and slightly metallic in that characteristic liver way that some loved and others found challenging. In Black households during the 1970s, chicken liver pâté represented culinary sophistication, recipes borrowed from French cuisine and adapted to Southern ingredients. Children who tried it felt brave and grown up, stepping outside their comfort zones to taste foods their parents enjoyed at special gatherings. Beef Wellington, adapted for Black families, was Christmas dinner centerpiece that proved fancy food could be made at home. Black mothers used the best beef tenderloin they could afford, searing it until crusty, then wrapping it in mushroom duxelles, pâté, and puff pastry. The secret was seasoning the mushrooms with Worcestershire sauce and hot sauce, which added umami and subtle heat that elevated the dish. The wrapped beef was brushed with egg wash and baked until the pastry was golden and the beef reached perfect medium rare. The secret additions stayed hidden because they represented adaptation, taking French cooking and making it speak to Black palates. This dish appeared at Christmas when families wanted to show sophistication. The preparation required skill and confidence that many women had, but rarely displayed. The Worcestershire and hot sauce additions stayed secret because they made the Wellington uniquely theirs. Sweet potato tea cakes were the taste of Christmas love, hand-shaped and baked with care when pie fixings were too dear. Mashed sweet potatoes took the place of expensive butter, giving each cake a soft golden hue and a sweetness all its own. The dough was mixed in big wooden bowls, rolled out on floured tables, and cut into circles by jar lids or tin cups. When they came out of the oven, the air turned rich with spice and sugar. These little cakes were passed around in napkins at church socials or packed for neighbors as gifts. Each one told a story of resourceful joy, how something so simple could still feel special. Children waited by the stove for the first warm bite, soft and fragrant in their hands. Sweet potato tea cakes were humble and heavenly, proof that love could rise even without plenty. Sweet potato pone carried dessert traditions from plantation kitchens into Harlem apartments where Sunday dinners demanded something sweet to finish the meal properly. Grated raw sweet potatoes were mixed with molasses, butter, eggs, and warming spices like cinnamon, nutmeg, and ginger until batter became thick and fragrant. The mixture was poured into heavy dishes and cooked slowly until the top caramelized into a dark, candy-like crust while the interior stayed moist and dense throughout. This wasn't fluffy sweet potato pie, but something more ancient and substantial, connected directly to African cooking traditions that persisted through generations. Families served pone warm with cream or cold the next morning as breakfast that satisfied deeply. The dish required no expensive ingredients, just patience and a hot oven kept at the right temperature. Children scraped bowls clean, fighting over caramelized edges that had gone slightly crispy against the pan. Sweet potato pone represented survival transformed into celebration. Cream cheese and olive pinwheels, made with softened cream cheese mixed with chopped green olives and rolled in tortillas, created tangy, savory bites. Children found intriguing. Aunties would soften cream cheese and mix it with finely chopped green olives, pimentos, and sometimes a touch of garlic powder, spreading the mixture evenly on flour tortillas. The tortillas were rolled tightly, wrapped in plastic, and refrigerated for hours to firm up before being sliced into colorful pinwheels. Each slice revealed swirls of white cream cheese dotted with green olive pieces, creating visual appeal that drew children's attention. In 1970s, Black households, these pinwheels represented creative entertaining, showing how simple ingredients could become elegant appetizers. Children loved them because they were fun to look at, easy to eat, and introduced them to olives in a creamy format that made the vegetables more approachable and less intimidating than eating them whole. Black-eyed pea fritters connected Harlem tables directly to West African cooking traditions that survived the Middle Passage and persisted through centuries of adaptation and evolution. Dried black-eyed peas were soaked overnight, skinned by hand, and ground into smooth paste, then seasoned with salt, onions, and hot pepper, before being shaped and deep-fried until golden brown and crispy. The fritters puffed up in hot oil, their exteriors becoming impossibly crispy, while insides stayed creamy and tender throughout. These were street food in Lagos and Accra, but in Harlem they became Sunday appetizers passed around before the main meal arrived at the table. The technique required practice since the paste needed proper consistency and the oil needed exact temperature to achieve perfection. Children grabbed these hot from the draining paper, burning fingers but unable to wait for cooling. This dish represented unbroken culinary connection across oceans and centuries. Sweet rice pudding with raisins was Christmas comfort at its most gentle, a dessert born from thrift and turned into grace. Leftover rice was simmered again in milk until creamy, with sugar, butter, and cinnamon stirred in to bring it to life. Plump raisins softened in the heat, releasing their sweetness into the mixture, while the scent of nutmeg or vanilla filled the air. The pudding thickened slowly, stirred by careful hands that had learned to measure not with cups, but with instinct. Served warm in simple bowls, it was dessert that asked for quiet, for gratitude, for the slow savoring of every spoonful. It tasted of simplicity, of love that didn't shout but lingered softly. For children, it was a treat. For elders, a memory. Sweet rice pudding was more than a way to use what was left. It was proof that comfort could come from the smallest acts of care. In every creamy bite lived peace, patience, and home. Cinnamon-spiked red velvet cake was Christmas tradition that separated real bakers from box mix pretenders. Black mothers made this from scratch using cocoa powder, buttermilk, and red food coloring. But the secret was ground cinnamon stirred into the batter, just enough to add warmth without announcing itself. The cake was light and tender, with subtle chocolate flavor that let the cream cheese frosting shine. That frosting was made with real cream cheese, butter, and powdered sugar, beaten until fluffy. Some families added pecans, others kept it smooth, but everyone agreed that cream cheese frosting from a can was an insult. The three-layer cake was assembled with generous frosting between each layer, then covered completely until no red showed. It was refrigerated overnight so the flavors could marry and the cake could firm up. The cinnamon addition stayed secret because it was subtle but essential, creating complexity that made people wonder what made this red velvet different from all others. Ham biscuits made with country ham and soft dinner rolls became handheld sandwiches that children devoured, the salty ham contrasting perfectly with the sweet, buttery rolls that held everything together. Mothers would slice country ham paper thin, the intensely salty, cured meat packed with flavor that needed only small amounts to satisfy, then tuck the slices into soft dinner rolls that had been split and buttered. Some families brushed the tops of the assembled biscuits with melted butter and baked them briefly to warm everything through and create slightly crispy tops. The combination of salty, savory ham with soft, slightly sweet rolls created perfect flavor balance that kept people coming back for more. In 1970s Black households, ham biscuits represented Southern tradition, appetizers that could be prepared ahead and served at room temperature. Children loved ham biscuits because they were familiar comfort food in easy-to-eat form. requiring no plates or utensils and perfect for grabbing. Apple Brown Betty was a dessert that turned leftovers into legacy. Slices of tart apples were layered between crumbles of old bread, drizzled with molasses or sorghum syrup instead of refined sugar. As it baked, the bread soaked up the syrup and juice, becoming dark and caramelized around the edges. Served warm, it was crisp on top and soft beneath, a perfect balance of texture and taste. For many African American families, this was a Christmas treat. Simple, sweet, and deeply nostalgic. It carried the smell of hearth and home, of cinnamon and care. Apple Brown Betty proved that even the humblest ingredients could rise to something beautiful. It was a dessert that didn't just fill bellies, it filled hearts too, turning old bread and fruit into comfort. In its sticky sweetness lived the story of survival sweetened by love. Candied yams with marshmallows appeared on Harlem holiday tables where families wanted something special that children would actually eat without complaint or any negotiation at all. Sweet potatoes were parboiled until just tender, sliced thick, and layered in baking dishes with brown sugar, butter, cinnamon, and vanilla until the syrup became thick and gloriously glossy from caramelization. Marshmallows were added in the final minutes of baking, browning under the broiler until they turned golden and slightly charred at the peaks beautifully. The dish was impossibly sweet, almost dessert, but served alongside savory dishes in the way Southern tradition always demanded it be. Families argued whether marshmallows were authentic or modern innovation, but children didn't care about such debates at all. The combination of caramelized sweet potato, melted butter, and toasted marshmallow created flavors that made vegetables acceptable to even the pickiest young eaters at the table. Brandied cranberry orange relish was the condiment that made store-bought cranberry sauce look like a joke. Black mothers made this weeks in advance with fresh cranberries that popped and burst as they cooked with sugar, orange juice, and zest. The secret was cooking them just until they broke down but still had texture, never letting them turn to mush. Once cooled, the relish was spiked with good brandy, enough to taste clearly but not be boozy, plus crystallized ginger chopped fine for heat. Some families added chopped pecans, others used golden raisins plumped in the brandy first. The relish was stored in glass jars where the alcohol preserved it and flavors melded into something more complex. By Christmas, it had transformed, sweet, tangy, warm, with brandy depth that paired perfectly with turkey and ham. Mothers guarded the brandy ratio and crystallized ginger addition because these made their relish memorable. Guests asked for the recipe every year, and every year mothers said it was just cranberries. Fried okra rounds served with ranch dressing were crispy, crunchy appetizers that introduced children to vegetables in ways that made them forget they were eating something healthy, the golden coating making every bite feel like a treat. Mothers would slice fresh okra into thick rounds, coating them first in buttermilk that helped breading adhere, then dredging them in seasoned cornmeal mixed with flour, salt, pepper, and garlic powder. The okra rounds were dropped into hot oil where they bubbled and crisped, the cornmeal coating turning golden brown while the okra inside stayed tender. Once drained on paper towels and sprinkled with extra salt while still hot, the okra was piled into serving bowls and placed near small dishes of ranch dressing that children dunked them into with enthusiasm. In Black households during the 1970s, fried okra represented Southern tradition meeting holiday hospitality. Children loved fried okra because it felt like eating fried chicken in vegetable form. Liver pudding on toast was Sunday morning protein in Harlem households where waste-nothing cooking extended to organ meats that others avoided entirely without consideration. Pork liver was ground with seasonings, cornmeal, and spices, then formed into loaves that could be sliced and fried as needed throughout the week. The slices sizzled in hot skillets until the exterior crisped, while the interior stayed soft and almost spreadable on the toast. Served on toasted bread with hot sauce and raw onions, it provided iron-rich protein that fueled working bodies through long days of labor. The taste was distinctly livery, but mellowed by the cornmeal and spices that balanced its natural intensity beautifully. Children either loved or hated liver pudding with no middle ground possible. Families who ate it considered it essential sustenance, while others couldn't understand the appeal. This dish represented complete utilization of the hog.
Which forgotten soul food recipe would you revive in your own kitchen today? Drop it in the comments below, hit like, and subscribe for more soul food history that deserves to be remembered and passed down.